Well, folks, thank you for hopping on. Appreciate it. Good to see you. I'm Gus Munoz. I'm an account executive here at BusPlanner. I am joined by Mr. Sloan Binford on today's webinar series, or our December edition of the webinar series on data-driven decisions in student transportation. So you can see a couple slides of our faces here. Excited to host you, Binford. Excited to have this conversation and discuss, data-driven decisions, your experience in transportation, and have a chat and an open dialogue. But Binford, I don't know if you want to say a couple words for your introduction. We're glad to have you on.
Yeah, and Gus, it's great to be here. I just really enjoy doing these. So thanks for the invite, and for everyone out there. My name's Binford Sloan, and I've been in the business since. Well, we're not going to say how long. Okay, we'll leave it at that. But it's been a few years, and I really enjoyed it. Met some tremendous people in the industry all across the country over the years, and just love working with school buses. I have, ever since I was right out of college. So it's great to be here. But I was a TD for almost 25 years. So great to be here.
Glad to have you, and very glad to hear from you, learn from your experiences, and all the other things you get to see in the world of transportation. So we've got a pretty action-packed agenda today. I'm very excited to go through the topic, right, and talk about data and talk about digital transformation and the usage of more and more data in people transportation. It feels like we're still in this middle ground where there's a lot of gut feeling decisions and there's data being applied. And what the data really does is help you with those decisions, right? And so excited to get in the weeds on it. It's really cool being here at BusPlanner and getting the opportunity to talk with districts across the country, learn from them, see what's working, what's not working, and have that just shared knowledge from folks, and then be able to wrap it all up and put it here into a conversation. So very excited about that prospect. But for today's agenda, we'll go over the need to use data effectively. We'll go over boosting performance with real-time GPS data. We'll talk about the importance of data-backed decisions. We'll also talk about strategies to support diverse student needs, using data to improve communication and operations. And then, as I said, we'll save that Q&A for the end there. So we'll go through some questions. So about 55 million total, K-12 students in the United States. Just shy of half of those, about 25 million or so, give or take, ride the bus every day. And we're just shy of 500,000 buses throughout the United States, which is mind-boggling, right? But it means we're transporting a lot of kids. And in transporting a lot of kids with the modern technologies that are being used, we're also collecting a lot of data to be able to run those buses more efficiently and use that data to make better decisions, right? And so I want to ask you, Binford, what are some of the decisions? What are some of the things you can use data for to help out transportation teams? And I know that's a very broad thing, but I want to start broad and sort of hone in.
Well, I think it's a great question to ask, Gus. And for everyone that's on here today, it's data comes in so many forms, right, and flavors, and it's what you ultimately want to get out of it, right? And people see school buses going up and down the road every day when they're driving, but it's what is behind those buses in order to make it work. That's really the power behind it. And so with the data, just knowing exactly what are you trying to get out of it, right? You want to make these strategic decisions, whether they're for today, next month, a year from now, even longer than that, right? And being able to go through that and analyze it is really going to be powerful. And it starts with those fundamental pieces and being able to methodically, connect them on different levels, right? From student information to, bus stops, which you have in the system now, to school boundaries, schools themselves, programs within schools. There are so many interwoven components that are themselves data, right? And again, it's how you're putting that together to facilitate the effectiveness and efficiencies that you're trying to get, not necessarily corrected, but to hone them to take you to that next level. And I think also another very, very, valid point to put out here is that as you're going through this in your organization, working with different stakeholders from the onset is going to help strengthen that collaboration. It's going to, show transparency. It's going to show that everyone is there as a team working together, right? It's not you in the transportation department versus, 15, 50 different schools, however many you have in your district, for example, or, transportation against parents or against drivers. It's all about collaboration.
Completely agree. And the collection of this data is very interesting because, as you were alluding to, Binford, and being able to communicate with other members of the organization, like your staff or parents or administrators, getting that information out and sharing data with them helps them get on board with your decisions, helps them come along and be a part of the decision making that's going on in transportation. So when we think about, I might be getting a little ahead of myself here, but when we think about like on time percentage, making sure the buses arrive at the right time, or making sure the buses are going and picking up the students at the correct addresses, all of that is data that's being collected. And when we show if those numbers are going awry or if those numbers are changing, we have actionable insights that we can take to leadership, that we can take to the schools, to parents, and give a path to improve those things. So it's really interesting. Binford, I want to take it back a little bit here, and I want to ask you, you said over 25 years as a transportation director. That is awesome. What are some things you've seen that have changed over time? So when you started day one as a transportation director, what were some of the data points or information that you wish you had that you can see now in the world?
Oh my gosh, I could be here all afternoon talking.
I know that's a big one too, but
No, I mean, from what we had when I got in the business, it was basically, for those you've been around a while, it was literally maps with, push pins. And that's what you used against, handwritten ledger sheets that you got to route students, right? A very primitive form of data collection, but that's what was available back at the time. And then so just coming into the advent of automated routing, right? And look at how that has transpired over the last 3 decades alone. It's really gone a long ways. And so again, I go back to what I started out with about that student data. That's really the foundational building component that you're going to want to start from, and everything that's associated, because everyone that's on this call today will appreciate when I say a child's learning day begins and ends with a ride on the school bus. Okay, we are an extension of their learning journey. So therefore, using everything that's associated with them will only enhance building a much better platform that you can use within the organization.
Really agree. And Binford, when you were talking about using push pins on a map to where we are today, I'm very curious to get your sense for a recommendation from folks that are, they recognize that maybe they're getting data today, but they're not getting what they want out of it, or they're not collecting it in a proper way. And we know good data in gets you good results out, right? And so I just want to ask for your piece of advice for folks that are starting this journey where they're getting serious about data collection, getting serious about moving the ball forward, and revamping their transportation teams.
Again, that's a good question. What I would say is this. Again, you got different stakeholder groups, right? Sit down and work with your data managers, your student information system people. And start building those relationships. Let them know what is working today, what's not working, and the pieces that aren't working. Show them that you want to be a partner there to help them get that data better. And so common examples, all right? Using correct addressing for students, for example, okay? It's not just about what you're putting in your routing system. It's what the district can use for so many other things outside of transportation. Another key point is to sit down and just look at what you guys want to do in your organization, right? What do you ultimately want to get out of the system? And sit down and look at all of the possibilities for different components of student data. I mentioned programs, right? If you're not collecting student programs today in 2025, start working with that, because that is so common now in districts, more so than what it was, 5-10 years ago. And it's just becoming more and more. Schedules changes. It used to be students would go Monday through Friday, same schedule. You ran the buses the same every morning, every afternoon. 5 years ago, guess what? When the world went through COVID, that all changed. And now we're seeing more and more, of these abbreviated schedules. They may go one cycle 2 days a week, another cycle of hours, 3 days. There's so many moving pieces now. And again, that's why it's so important to make sure you're collecting every single piece of data that you need to.
100%. Reporting it out too and making it interpretable, right? And then, comparing it versus benchmarks. And so let's drill down on all those different components, right? We're sort of setting the stage here for, data on a higher level. Like let's drill in on some of the specific things, like GPS data, for example. Like we know having a GPS system in the bus, most places at this point do, most school districts across the country do. They know having GPS data lets them know, hey, if they get a call from a parent saying the bus was speeding, they can check it. They can check to make sure the bus is getting to the right places on time. They can see where it is right now, actively in the moment. We're also getting very interesting data points these days, right? Around the door is open, the stop arm has been deployed, the amber lights have turned on. We're getting engine diagnostics. The lights on the check engine light comes on, and all of a sudden you get a report over to your mechanics. Driver behavior. Drivers are speeding, cornering, accelerating, braking too hard. We get all that information, right? And so we know getting GPS units in there is helping folks reduce fuel, reduce idle time, make sure that, folks in the transportation office know the buses are getting there on time, they're getting that visibility. And it also, helps communicate to districts information on, those arrival times. And with a parent app, they're getting the ability to see when is the bus coming to pick up the student. And so I wanted to ask your opinion on GPS. What is an example when you adopted GPS? How did it help change your operation when you were a transportation director?
Oh, it did it in so many ways, honestly. And I think for me, what really propelled the district I was in at the time to be so successful in ultimately reducing 39% of our routes was the incorporation of the GPS into the routing sphere. Okay. Because you're now able to take both of those worlds and treat them as one. And when you do that and you work with the data on that granular level and you embrace it, then you can, see those efficiencies that before were not available to you, right? You were able to accurately portray that for a specific run, for example, it's going to take you, 36 minutes to run. Whereas before you had it in the system, and because the map was not calibrated to match what the buses were actually doing, that same run was, 45 minutes. 6 minutes may not sound like a lot, okay? But, when you have one bus on average running, 4 runs a day, right? 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, over, a 10-month school year, it's going to add up, is it not? And so again, it's just simple things like that. Being able to do it is what's really going to enhance. And I work with people all the time, and it's really interesting to see how many today still do not, run the routing and the GPS within one, environment. They will keep them side by side, but they don't put them as one. And I would say, explore doing that, because it will probably be the best thing, or one of the top three that you could do for your school community.
No, completely aligned on that. And I want to talk actionable insights around that. So, we're talking about reducing idle time, ensuring the buses are getting where they need to go, ensuring better routing because you know where the buses are actually going. How often would you check these reports? Were you in there daily? Were you doing an automated report that was coming out once a week or something? I want to get a better sense of, your workflow and checking this data and the reports of the data.
I think it's going to be different for everybody. I mean, for me, yes, I was in there every day, but I'm kind of a nerd about it. Honestly, I always have been.
That's good to do.
That's,
We love it.
but if you don't sit there and first, embrace it, and then second, continue to cultivate that process, you're never gonna be able to obtain the level of quality that ultimately you're looking to achieve, for again, your school community.
Yeah, I'm completely aligned on it. If you had to say one report that was coming out of a GPS unit, married with your routing software, what was it? What was the big number you were always striving for? Was it on time arrival percentage? Was it stop matching percentage? Was it, I don't know. What was the big one for you?
For me, it was actually maximizing the percentage of time that the buses were in operation with students on board
Great
versus
answer.
when they weren't. Because again, the higher that percentage is, you're more efficient theoretically, right? Because a lot of the districts now, a lot of the states, this is how they get their funding, right? It's all about efficiency, because you're having to do more with less. So if you're running a bus around town, 70% of the time with no students on board, that's basically just, money that you're losing as an operation. Where on the other hand, if you have a bus that's going around town with 70 to 80% of the time with students on board, you're just maximizing your resources.
Completely agree. That utilization I think is a great starting point. If I had to chalk it up to one number, that utilization rate, start there, as you're
Mm-hmm.
embracing this data journey.
Mm-hmm.
Look at it, see those percentages Binford's talking about here. If it's 70, if it's 90, I mean, everything in between, you want to be able to see how often are your buses actually running. You probably have a good sense, right, from your gut, just seeing what's out there in the world. But having the hard numbers gives you a space to look at and to view and start honing in and addressing some of the other needs that you can get those utilization rates up. So I do want to kick off into a little bit of a poll here. So I want to ask, which data insight would deliver the most impactful operational gains, folks? So you'll see it pop up. There's a little poll here. Would love to get your answers and give you a minute to do so. Now we're in a real-time route and GPS location data is now the one that will deliver the most impactful operational gains for folks. Awesome. Well, thanks for voting, folks. We're going to go to this next slide here. Now let's talk about the importance of data back decisions and what do you get, like bang for your buck? What are you really looking for? So Binford alluded to this quite a bit, but you have to figure out what the problem is in order to address it, right? In order to figure out what might need some fixing or what might need some extra love across the department, you need that data on hand. And so we'll talk a bit about that as well. Binford, I would love your insights, but using data, let's dial in on some of the measures you can make, right? So we can improve planning across routes and schedules, getting that utilization rate up. We can reduce legal risk through accurate records. And that's, the import of correct information from the student information systems. Eliminate manual work or reduce manual work to help just make the day flow smoother, right? And prevent high risk incidents before they recur. So we can get data on specific areas. If we see that an accident has occurred a couple times or an incident has occurred a couple times, that's something you might want to focus in on a specific section of road, route, driver, what have you. Binford, let's talk about this a little bit more. When we're talking about the ability to have this data coming in, I don't know if you want to expand a bit more on the reporting, like reducing routes, on getting this information, in one view.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So, again, working with it, you mentioned, about, accurate records, right? And the first thing that popped into my head was when you're working with certain, student groups, let's say special needs, for example. If you don't have the accurate information that's coming in for that child, what is their, why are they coded as special needs, right? What types of, do they have behavioral issues? If they do you have a behavior management plan so that your driver and your monitor know exactly what to do on the bus should an episode occur? Again, it's very important to, have these things, right? And one of the things that I really like about, especially with BusPlanner, is how that information can be brought through in these workflow actually, there's a product called BusPlanner Workflow where that can come in and be attached to the student record, right? So you'll know those issues. And then from there, that can be segued into, onto the vehicle. So if you have the tablets, right, and if you have the BusPlanner Turns driver navigation app, those same workflow forms can also be attached to the student record there, so that if one of those episodes were to occur, your driver and your monitor on board know exactly what to do to diffuse the situation. And it just reduces that legal risk right there, because you've done everything as an organization that's available to you that you can do. And so to prevent those, as you worded here, high risk incidents.
Yeah, completely agree. What's really interesting to me is I get to spend a lot of time at BusPlanner talking with districts across the country, big, small, everything in between, right? And we have these conversations about, their problems and what they're hoping to fix and what they're hoping to change and how they're hoping to, evolve throughout the years. And it does feel as though if I had to chalk up every single problem, if I could find one unifying sentence or problem statement, I would say it's a lack of communication. I would say most of the reasons why, and caveat, but most of the reasons why things occur, bad things occur, is because there's a lack of communication. There is some detail that's recorded somewhere that's not shared, or it's not shared easily. And so, there's all this information stored in certain places. As you're talking about, Binford, inside the student information system, maybe we have like an IEP or a 504, or we have behavioral information that, school bus drivers should know, the transportation teams like routers and dispatchers should know as they're making decisions on the day-to-day to transport these students. But if that information's in one place and it's not in another, and everyone's flying blind, all of a sudden we've now created a problem. And this problem will pop up and it'll persist unless you can get all this information into one place, all this data in one place, to really fix it. And so that free exchange of communication, the free exchange of data, is very, very important to having a successful operation. And so, Binford, you alluded to this a little bit there, right? But we were talking about the diverse needs of students with special needs, right? It's really important to have, their requirements inside of something like your routing software, or getting their requirements in a place that's reportable, to have this data available to help you make better decisions, right? For seamless transportation, to help move students from A to Z without incident. And whether that's sending a bus that has a wheelchair ramp to go pick up a student that has a wheelchair, or letting the driver know that a student with behavioral issues might need, an extra watch, an extra hand, an extra eye. I think those are very important, right? So I want to talk about this quite a bit, because back in the early days, right, you had this, maybe there was a paper file, maybe you had the digital file, and again, this was siloed. So I want to ask about your experience about marrying these things and improving that communication that I was talking about with transportation teams.
Yeah, I mean, and it used to be that way, and now it's not. And I think, again, just going back to the previous example, being able to have it in one true ecosystem, one that is also regulated. So what I mean by that is, if you were to have the forms for that special needs student I was, giving an example of earlier with the behavior, right? I mean, and it's on the bus. Say you have it in a 3-ring binder, all right? The driver and the monitor don't see, anything wrong with that. Hey, they got their stuff. They're good to go because this is what they got from, the dispatch office when they started working. The problem is that binder secured? And what I mean by that is where nobody can access the privacy information that's inside that binder. Chances are, most cases, it's not. Maybe some it is, but most probably not. And that's why going back to having it in this digital format, okay, where it can be regulated and nobody can access it without having the proper login credentials to get to it. And that's again where, you're able to keep that in that, so you're compliant with all of that. Same thing with pre-trip, post-trip, right? That's another good example. It used to be pen and paper a lot. Sometimes it still is, but there's so much now that can be done digitally because of the technology that's out there on the buses. And that just then segues over into, driver logs. That kind of goes hand in hand with that, but you're also able to document those actual hours and things like that your people are doing. And this can then play into, trainings, right? Where you're able to actually keep a qualified record of what all of your staff members are receiving in their training hours, over any given period, because that's going to vary from district to district, state to state. But again, it's just good to have everything. And that's another reason why the BusPlanner ecosystem is so robust. It does all of these things I'm talking about right now today, and it has for a very long time. And it's just a wealth of knowledge to be able for any organization to be able to build from.
Completely agree. I want to circle back here on one more point for transporting students with special needs. There's a lot that needs to be tracked, right? When we're talking about the IEPs or we're talking about 504s, or just accurate records are very important to ensure compliance. And when we have that data within the routing software or within dispatch tools or within GPS, I mean, we have a much better understanding of how to support these students. What are some big things when we're talking about this overarching view of data? What are some big things that folks should be aware of? What reports should they be looking at? How would you suggest they make sure that they're tracking this data accurately within, again, the routing software, the dispatch, what have you?
I think, again, it's going to go back to where the origin of this. So in the case of the special needs student you were referring to, or that group, working with the IEP committee, first and foremost, and being a part of that in the onset so that you clearly are aware what the IEP committee and the parents and the school, everyone involved is, recommending that's in the best interest of the child. Are you going to be able to meet those accommodations and give them the service that they need? So it starts there. And then from that, you build into how you want to incorporate that into your routing system so that you can make sure that you're complying with everything and giving them the prompt and service that is warranted here.
I love that. I cannot emphasize that enough, though. It's really important for transportation to have a seat at that table, and obviously we can't make all the IEP meetings, we can't make everything, but it's good to have a relationship with those folks at the schools on the district level, because then you get heads up, then you have knowledge, then, if they're educated on what can be done versus what can't be done, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes, I can't tell you how many times I hear it, but things will be overpromised that, yeah, transportation will do that when transportation cannot accommodate that for XYZ reason. And so if you have these relationships with folks that are helping build the IEPs, they'll learn from you as you learn from them, and that in turn will help streamline this entire thing. That'll make
Mhm.
for better paths. That'll make for better transportation, um, and it'll also ensure that like this data exchange that's going on will make everyone very happy and safer.
Yes.
All right. So another question popping up, folks. Where does your transportation team need data the most? Where do you think it's the most important right now, today? Where do you think data could help you folks out? Where do you think you're maybe getting some underreporting? All right. So far, I'm seeing routing efficiency and planning accuracy as the top vote here. Got a couple other options, right? Communication with parents, compliance tracking, managing operational and daily needs. But yeah, routing efficiency and planning accuracy is kind of definitely winning right now. All these things, of course, are very important, and we'll sort of discuss some of this here. Want to get into the next section, but yeah, we'll be rolling with routing efficiency and planning accuracy has won the poll. I definitely want to talk more about that, right? But I think it's important to also touch the mark on this on communication and operations. It is really, really important when we're collecting data to use it, to put it out into the world, not just gather it for gathering's sake, not just pulling reports for pulling reports' sake, but again, we're trying to identify problems. And you might have a sense of the problem already exists, but you're not sure how to tackle it. And so getting the myriad of data that's available to you or that can be available to you is really important to help you figure out which levers to pull to address your needs. Right, we want to improve coordination, as I was discussing, improve communication between all the different people that are impacted by transportation. So, we think about it as transportation office and bus drivers, right? But there's so much more than that, right? I mean, like parents, students, the schools, your homeroom teachers, your secretaries, your principals, admin at the district office. All these people are impacted by what's going on in the transportation department. It's important for them to also get some information instead of having to call you all day and ask for that info directly. So getting better data improves communication. You can help automate some of these messages. You can help do manual messages that'll go out to these stakeholders. And that in turn supports faster routing, scheduling, and the resolution of issues, helping us identify the problems faster, right? Binford, can I ask you about a time where you use data to make a big change or make a big decision in your transportation department?
Yes. So, again, going through and refining the operation on the front, right, to do the, like I was mentioning earlier, the reduction in the routes. That's where it starts. But then from there, you have to maintain it, right? And, for pupil transportation, we're a service industry, okay? And I used to tell people all the time that were on the teams with me is that, we're not going to get a pat on the back every day for doing a great job. It's not going to happen. What you will get is when you don't do something right, you're going to get told about it. And of all the tremendous things that everybody does in pupil transportation every day, everyone on this call, you do phenomenal things. Every hour on the hour, 5-6 days a week. Okay. But there's so many balls that are in the air that you're having to juggle, right? It becomes very challenging to maintain that. And so the weak link of the chain is the communication in pupil transportation, unfortunately, because again, you're dealing with so many different entities, right? It's not just the transportation office. You may have several different zone offices around your county that you're in. The schools, right? But you talked about the schools, a very big piece of this. Parents, right? Everybody loves the parent apps and they're great, but they're only as good as the data that goes into them. So if you don't have what you're actually doing at that point in time to show, they're not going to know, that Johnny is now, riding on bus 506 instead of the regular bus 105, and they're going to now be getting home 45 minutes late. So again, it goes back to so many different pieces, and you have to be able to effectively communicate to all of those groups simultaneously, right? A very large one that a lot of times gets left out, and they shouldn't. It's the drivers themselves. Why? Because they're out in the vehicles. They're driving around town. They're not there. So again, there's so many things that has to go into, and having that communication, the ability to, push out the updates to all of these groups, again, is what is going to make you become the hero at the end of the day, and as that service organization. One of the things that BusPlanner has now, that honestly I salivate over, because we didn't have this when I was running the buses, and that's our dispatch application, where you can actually go in there, and as you have drivers who call out, or buses that break down, or whatever the case may be, and you're having to move stops from one bus to, say, 2, 3, 4, 5 other buses, you're having to break up the runs. The system does it right there. It's drag and drop. Okay. And then when you apply it, it then starts sending out those automated updates to the parent app, right? So they're getting it. Your school people are getting it, right? If you've got the tablets, your drivers. So again, all of the things that I've been talking about where we stumble in the industry have now just been wiped away, right? And it doesn't take a massive team to do it. And you can do all of this without touching your routing database. Okay, that's the beauty about it. So yeah, there's a lot of great ways you can use the data to improve your operation.
Completely agree. We've reached the end of our slides. Well, I guess we'll call it there. Folks, very much appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for attending. We were glad to host you, glad to have you. Binford, thank you for your time today as we're going through this and discussing. It's always great to catch up with you and pick your brains, your wealth of experience. Folks, you can learn more about us at BusPlanner.com. We are tremendously thankful for the opportunity to be able to speak with you, and hoping to connect in the future as well.